Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm, and we have Stubble McShave with us today. How are you today, Stubble?
Oh, I'm great. It's a new year, and yeah, we're looking forward to 2022. Hope it's better than 2021 and 2020. And yeah,
Well, Happy New Year to you, Stubble. It is
mm,
wonderful to see you in this new year. I also am looking forward to a wonderful 2022. So that's good. And of course, today we're here to discuss the season one wrap up of the Wheel of Time TV series that had premiered on Amazon last year and wrapped up right at the end of the year. And what I was going to say is, I think first of all, we're very lucky to get this series. The books came out over 20 years ago. And a lot of times, you think you're going to get a series and then, it doesn't happen. And, we got it. Like this was definitely, and it the whole thing aired, and as you said, Stubble, that there is a season two on the way. So, very clearly, we're very lucky to even get the series at all. But as we were just discussing a few moments ago about the average viewer on Amazon, and Amazon has a huge, people who have subscribership to it. So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to see the Wheel of Time pop up on their suggestions to watch this series. And it must be millions and millions of people who have watched this series, who many of whom I suspect may not know anything about the Wheel of Time. But honestly, I think that the advertisement for it overall, looking at it, I think that they did a good job with that. And I think a lot of people are going to continue to click on it. They're going to continue to watch it. I think a lot of people are going to keep enjoying it for the next year or so. What do you think, Stubble?
yeah, I've noticed that just in the Twitter feed and in all of that, there's a lot of people who wondering what the books, should I read them, should I not read them? Oh, I got to pick this up. Where can I find it? And so it's absolutely generated an interest among the huge community who has never seen ever or known about the books or anything like that. So I think it's yeah, and so the book readers, people who have read the Wheel of Time books, we are a small percentage of the audience. We are maybe 1 or 2% or something like that. Yeah. So
Yeah, and that is very interesting when we think about it. And of course, as we go on and see these adaptations of our favorite books and IPs going the distance, that is something to think about. And I'm just so happy that so many people have become interested in it after seeing the advertisement on Amazon, which it is there. You cannot turn on Amazon TV and not see an advertisement for the Wheel of Time. So if you have Amazon Prime or Amazon subscription, you're going to see the Wheel of Time advertised. And I love that they're continuing to advertise it, and did so during the entire, first run of the episodes, and are continuing to do so with the series, because I think that that's really important. But the other thing that I was going to say is, there are all these millions of people who are watching it. Honestly, I don't really know what their opinion is. I know that we, just like you and I, Stubble, are here on Positive Fandom talking about what our impressions are of season one of the Wheel of Time. There are so many different impressions, and it's not like we can go to a place and say, or somewhere, maybe on YouTube, there might be a review that says, for someone who never read the books, my Wheel of Time, thoughts. I'm sure there's a video out there that says that. But, you are someone who has been a fan of the Wheel of Time for so long. You've read the books, and I am someone who's just become a fan of the Wheel of Time over the past few months. I've listened to the audiobook for the first book, and I have to say that, as I said before, reading the book has really enhanced my appreciation for their attempt to make this series. And, you and I both know that there was no way that they were going to be able to include everything we wanted to see in this series. But for me, after reading one book, and I have to, kind of look at this, did this series feel like the Wheel of Time to me personally? And I am going to say that I feel like the series was inspired by the Wheel of Time. And I think that there were a lot of elements from the book that made it into the series. But I think that a few changes, it would feel more like what I was expecting to see, per se. What is your impression? Did this series feel like the Wheel of Time to you? Or were there certain things that you felt changed it into maybe something that was inspired by the Wheel of Time, or none of the above? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's both just yes and no on that question, because there's a lot of changes to the plot through the first book, and but the characters feels more or less the same. Maybe not from the first book, but from the series. You get, if you think about the characters from the first few books of the series, I think they got the characters kind of maybe not spot on all the time, but pretty good. And when it comes to new scenes and so on, because you have read or listened, or what we call it, to the first book, and it all more or less plays out. You have the point of view from Brand for maybe 85 or 90% of the book. Then you have some Perrin, and you have a little bit Nynaeve POV, and they are not very. In the first book, they are not very capable people. They are just your average village person, more or less. And it's very hard, and everything is internal. And if you would translate it directly from the book to screen, I think you would have a big mess on your hands, because it doesn't really translate to screen in the same way. I would say that this series is a little bit darker in tone than the first book. They have aged up the characters a few years just to get away from that confusion that people may think that it's a YA series. YA didn't exist as a concept when the series started to be written. YA, it's a categorization from the beginning in the libraries and the bookstores, where you put a certain kind of book, and at the beginning it was artificial, but now it's been, over the years, it's been a brand, a YA brand. And Wheel of Time is not YA, even though it has kind of older teenagers in the principal roles in the books. So they aged them up to around 20 in the TV series, which means that they have more complicated relationships, and it's a little more of a darker tone perhaps than the books. I felt like the TV series was, this is from the standpoint of a book reader, and I felt it was kind of rushed in the first, almost all episodes it felt rushed. And I think they should have had a few more episodes to, you didn't have that many character moments. You had a few character moments. Like in episode 4, you have, Lan Nynaeve moments. Maybe we could have more of those, where they just talk to each other in a great scene. In the first few episodes, they went from event to event to event, more or less. And I think if they had just stopped and taken a breather and just had some scenes, I think it would have added a lot, and I think it wouldn't felt as rushed as it felt in the beginning. But I think they captured the spirit of this, not the first book, but the early part of the series. So if you take the first few books and mix them together, and then you take out the first part of that, that's kind of the feeling I get from the TV series. If you were a book reader and you expected a one-to-one adaptation with, your favorite scenes on the screen, I think you would be disappointed. That was not what we got. It was an adaptation of making it work for the screen. I don't think scene to scene adaptation would have worked. Do you think that, since you read the first book?
I don't think a scene to scene adaptation would have worked, but I do believe, and we have spoken about this in a previous video, that if they had concentrated on the importance of establishing that first episode, and it had been sort of like more of an hour and a half, 2-hour episode where what needed to be said or shown was shown, I think that the series itself would have unfolded in quite a different way. And when you mentioned that you felt that many of the episodes were rushed, I have to agree with that. I felt that there was sort of this condensed version, like the Cliff Notes version, so to speak, of this series. And I think part of the reason why it felt that way for me is mainly because the concepts were not as clearly defined as they could have been or shown in a lot of the scenes. So, I think that a few tweaks here and there would make things very different. But also, for the average viewer, for someone who doesn't know what the Wheel of Time is, and this is the first time they're watching it, they might not quite understand, what's going on from episode to episode. Not that it isn't easy to follow, but just that it just wasn't shown in a way that, you could just pick it up. Oh, that's what they meant. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And so I think that sometimes when you miss out on those cues, whether they're visual or whether they're something that someone verbally says, people are kind of left wondering, well, I don't really understand what the importance of this scene is. And it's okay to say, well, if this happens, then, we're going to end up in this situation. And I really want to avoid that situation. It's okay for a character to say that. We really don't want to be in a situation where, and then what's at stake, or you're kind of reminded as to what can happen. And we didn't always get that. But, I think, as I said, I feel like this series was inspired by the Wheel of Time, and that it took a lot of good things from the Wheel of Time to make the series. But perhaps it didn't quite wrap everything up in a package that is entirely recognizable as a Wheel of Time for me. So, looking at the first book even, and I know that some parts of the story may have been taken from other books as well, but that's how I looked at it. So just looking at it from face value, I think it has the look of it. The look of the series is very nice. And, I did want to mention, and I kind of made a list for you, Stubble, and you're such a good sport for looking at the list of what I have down. The actors. And I think that they did a wonderful job with this casting. I love the Moraine character. And of course, how I feel about her warder. And I also think they did a great job with the 5 potential dragon castings.
Yeah.
Nynaeve feels very like the actress who plays her. If she feels very conflicted, and I love that conflict where she really doesn't like what's happening, and it's clear from the look on her face in the series that that's how she feels. There's no sort of confusion as to how she's feeling. But I think that for some of the other characters like Rand and Matt and even Perrin, maybe all the male characters, we didn't really get that sense. Perrin's plight and his inner conflict was visible. But as you said, you had mentioned that they kind of put a lot of weight on the Perrin character, and you weren't, necessarily as pleased with what they did with him. But I think that his potential as this wolf, or whatever he is, with the eyes, and I really liked that. That really was fascinating to me. What's going to happen to Perrin? And of course, the Matt character. You mentioned that particular actor won't be returning, and they had to make an amendment to this series because of the pandemic. But looking at Rand, he's probably the one character that had the least kind of attention in regards to how he was feeling, or perhaps they wanted him to be somewhat of a mystery. But I thought, for the sake of a television series, they could have exposed a little bit more about Rand. For example, in some of the scenes where the Rand character, he supposedly is using the one power, but we don't know. And I think that for the sake of a TV series, it would have been nice to have seen that earlier on, and we would have had a sense of where Rand was. I mean, do you think it would have lost anything if we had seen Rand use the one power in earlier episodes? Or do you think that what they did by revealing it in the way they did was okay?
Well, they made the decision to have who the dragon was a mystery, and that meant that they couldn't go into detail on the young characters because, if you know too much about them, you can piece things together, and then you have ruined the mystery. So, I think that decision made it so that Rand was in the background a lot of the time, and Perrin, I think most of his arc from the first book will see a lot of that in season 2. I think they consciously pushed that to the next season so that they could establish the Aes Sedai and spend time on them right from the beginning. Because, as you know, in the first book, the Aes Sedai it's just Moraine, more or less. It's no one else, and they wanted to establish, because the Aes Sedai are so important for the whole book series. And when it comes to Matt, I think, in the book, we don't get a POV in the books from Matt until book 3, in the middle of book 3. And in the first book, he's after Shadow Logos, he has an altered state of mind. He's cursed by the dagger. It's not the true Matt we see. So unfortunately for this actor, he never got to play the great parts of Matt, which are to come, I hope. Because Matt is Nynaeve and Matt are my two favorite characters from the series. They are the most miserable, horrible people in the first book, but I can tell you that in the books, every character more or less have a character arc. There's not any one note character that doesn't change during the course of events. So, yeah, now I'm rambling, I think. But anyway,
no, it's okay.
and the whole COVID and Barney Harris leaving the show at the COVID hiatus. They had two different shutdowns from COVID, which totaled a year, and they had to do rewrites for the end of episode 6, and they had to rearrange a lot and do rewrites for episode 7. I think the whole love triangle was emphasized in episode 7 to have attention that was left after, since we didn't have Matt there. I think that scene would have been some kind of confrontation with Matt originally, and they didn't have him. And in episode 8, they had planned a big battle that they couldn't do. They had prepared for it, and because of COVID restrictions, they couldn't do any of it. They had to improvise, and Perrin had to fill a lot of Matt's plot points, so to speak, with Padan Fain, because Matt was set up to have a confrontation with Padan Fain. You saw it from episode 1. So that was unfortunate, but I really liked the characters overall, and the actors especially. I thought all the primary actors were great in their roles, and I loved a lot of secondary actors like Sofia Corneros, who played Swan, was great. Alvaro Mota, who played Logain, was great, and I thought Kate Fleetwood made Leandrin a more three-dimensional character than she is in the books, and I mean the writing as well. And Maria Doyle Kennedy, who played Ela, the tinker who with the way of the leaf philosophy.
Yes.
I think she was great, and Alexander Willom, who played Tom Marilyn. I think he did a good job. They changed Tom Marilyn a bit, because in the books he's a little bit older, and he's more like a traveling poet or something. Or, you know, he has a lute instead of in the TV series he has a guitar. In the books he has a lute and a flute, and he tells stories, and that's cool. But I don't know if that translates to television as well. Someone playing the harp and telling a story. That's more exciting in your mind rather than on the screen, I think.
Well, they tried it in The Witcher, where they have a man who sings, and he kind of has a lute, and you know, and it's okay, but it doesn't have the same feeling as a guitar, so to speak. A very different feel. And the character in The Wheel of Time, he's a mature man. So you know, it's not that I don't imagine mature men playing lutes, but I always imagine sort of like a young kind of I guess a character playing a lute. I'm not quite sure why I have this in my mind, Stubble, but the guitar felt like, you know, he was a man who had experiences and had been on the road, and you know, it just felt more appropriate for this actor, even in my opinion. But I would have still watched it if he played a lute. So you know, but it does give a different feel.
Yeah, and I got the Clint Eastwood feel for him a bit. You know, like a 60-year-old Clint Eastwood or something like that.
Yeah, is this gentleman in his 60s? I mean, he's
he's in his 50s. If in the books he's a little bit older than 60, but in the TV series he's like between 50 and 60 or something. So they aged him down a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it was good, very, very good. I think in regards to one of the episodes where Rand and Matt go into that mining village, or whatever kind of village is this horrible looking village. Yeah. And they come across a person who worships the Dark One, the innkeeper, and I can't remember her name. I really liked that character because I wasn't expecting her to be a bad guy. And of course she was. And, you know, she was the one who gave us one of the first clues about Rand's abilities, because she told him that the door is locked and it's made out of iron and you can't get out, almost like being in a prison or a jail or something.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure what people expected when he busted out of there. But, you know, later on, of course, we find out a little bit more of what's going on. But I really liked her character. She scared me. And the part where the Gleeman, you know, kind of stabs her, there's no other way to say it, also was quite shocking to me, but done well. And I like to see series where I'm like, oh, wow, okay, ouch. You know, I think that was very good. But I thought that the woman who played that did a great job of, you know, now we can see. I think what it did was that it kind of showed us what a person who worships the Dark One might be like. Yeah. And so, you know, she was deceptive in the beginning. And then that character went ahead and revealed the truth. You know, not only am I a worshiper of the Dark One, I'm the one who's going to be bringing you to him, and you can't get out. Like, that was really neat. You know, that whole organization of what she was saying to him. And of course, Rand, you know, in his instinctive ways was like, I've got to get out of here.
And I think she was great in the role. The actress was great, and she represented like 5 different encounters in the books, because they go to several different places, and several of them have, you know, dark friends who try to capture them or whatever they're trying to do. And so instead of going to, because that would have been pretty uninteresting to have like 4 or 5 similar encounters in the TV series. So she represented that whole journey for those characters, which was a good thing, I think, for a TV series, because they need to go. There's a lot of ground to cover, and
Another very interesting thing about that scene was that, you know, she presented the scenario of, oh, it's just too good to be true. You know, like they don't have enough money for a room. And then all of a sudden somebody says, oh, no, that's okay. I'll give you work to. And I'm like,
they finally get a break. Finally. And it's too good to be true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I thought that was very good. I think that the villagers not the villagers, but when Matt and Rand also go and stay at the farm, so to speak, That whole situation there for me was a little confusing. But I understood what they were trying to do. I don't know whether it was absolutely necessary, but perhaps it was shown to further show that Matt's character was being influenced by the dagger.
We didn't really know if it was him or not. So I think it was intentional to.
Yeah, there's a lot that's unknown, and of course, that's the last time we see the Gleeman, right? Right?
Do you think he survived?
The Gleeman?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think that he fights bad people for a living. I think that's his. I mean, in addition to having fantastic music and entertainment, this man, might be doing this just, as part of what he does. So I do think he survived. And I think that he knew that they had to leave right away. I think he knew what the dagger was as well. I think that Gleeman knows a lot more than what he revealed. And it would have been great to see him. Maybe we'll see him again, that character again, but we shall see. I liked most of the Aes Sedai casting. I thought that it seemed very realistic, and I also love Sue-Ann. I love Sohio Kanedo. I really am a huge fan of her work prior to this, and this also made me feel even more enamored of her work. I also wanted to mention. I also wanted to mention that one other thing that I thought was very interesting was when they enter in some of these towns and places that they visited, they did seem very real to me. So that, the dark city felt like a city that was, you were not supposed to be there. What are you doing there? Can't you see how dark and gloomy this is? So, the idea that they would end up, it's sort of like a place of last resort. And I did like the scenes where they finally ended up in the Tarvalon, which was, I think was needed for us to see the White Tower. We needed to kind of have that visit in this. It did feel, like a very special place, a beautiful place to live. And I think a lot of people would be attracted to be around the Aes Sedai. Maybe they have sort of like a sense of security being around the Aes Sedai. What did you think of the character and the actor who played and if you didn't already mention it, but you might have already mentioned it, so I apologize if you did, the woman who plays the she predicts the future, the Seer.
Min I think she did a good job. She in the book, her primary feature is that she's the only girl that wears pants, trousers, and she is a bit of a tomboy in the books, a little bit, but I think that she did a good job, and I think the reason that they put her in episode 7 was that they wanted to keep the mystery and about the dragon, so they couldn't have her in episode 2 or 3 spilling the beans about all the visions and so on. So I think that's why they placed her at that point in the story.
I also liked when her character saw the second vision, when they all, like, let's say after she realized there was going to be an invasion, and she looked at, at Egwene and Nynaeve and some of the other people in the bar who were just patrons, and they were soldiers, and she could see what was going to happen to them. That was really cool. I think that one, like, that's how I think a scene that can be shown for like less than a minute can tell so much, to the observer. We knew exactly what was happening. It's like, oh, that doesn't look good. This is.
And she and there are a lot of prophecies in the books and her visions, and then there are dreams and all of that. That's used a lot of as foreshadowing by Robert Jordan in the books. So it was used similar here in the TV series, that there's some bad things that's going to happen, and in the books it's a little bit more, not as direct at what it implies. Here we got like, there are Trollocs over there, and these people are going to die. Okay, what's going to happen? So Yeah. No, I think they did maybe they could have done it some way better. I don't know, but I thought it was okay. I think what they did.
And I, the other thing I was going to say is, you know, and I know we had discussed about how they had to use CG in some of the parts, you know, because of everything that's going on in the world. But the other thing I was going to say is and I can't remember the character's name, but is it the Egrel? He is the wise, they live in the steading.
Yeah, Logain.
Yeah, is it Loyal?
Oh no, Loyal, Logain. Exact, Loyal. Sorry,
And
sorry. I made a mistake. Sorry. Yeah, Loyal.
yeah, it's okay. It's
There
like,
we go.
it's not a big deal. I would have liked to have learned a little bit more about what he could impart on us. And it's sad because, you know, of course, his character, let's say in the story, in the TV series was killed off. And so, you know, I have a feeling we're not going to be seeing him anymore, but it would have been great to learn a little bit more from him.
I can tell you that something that I didn't like was that there was a lot of fake deaths in the last episode. And I can tell you that the actor has been seen filming for season 2.
What? What? I don't understand. In the same character?
I suppose so. And the showrunner confirmed that he didn't die. He was severely injured, but he didn't die.
Okay.
So,
okay.
But we as the audience thought that he died, and I think that was one. That was. I didn't like that. I don't like the fake death. You know, that they have. But so I think we'll get more wise words from him later on.
Okay, well then my wish is granted.
I think.
The other thing I was going to say is there was one more character that I wanted to mention, and now it's the characters it's slipping from my mind. Overall, in regards to the warders,
yeah,
you know, I think I did like how we were explained, you know, what their importance was and their connection to the Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure how I felt about the episode where the warder, where Corinne's
Step-In.
Yeah, where Step-In kind of like that episode. I'm not quite sure whether that episode did anything for us. I mean, of course, I understand his pain. Yes, I get that. But you know, what did you think of that episode? Was it something that could have been done differently?
If they had 12 episodes, I wouldn't mind that episode. But now you only have 8, and I think that so they want to establish the connection between Aes Sedai and Warder and what it means to lose one's Aes Sedai, that it's more or less a death sentence for the Warder. Unless you manage to pull through and whatever. So, great. That's information that's relevant, I guess. We could have gotten that as maybe a 10-minute thing in an episode. I think they could have used all that time that they spent on that on something else. On the other hand, the actor is a big actor. Maybe he wanted a bigger part, or I don't know how TV works when it comes to those things. I know that it's affected that they moved a few characters from season 1 to season 2 because they don't want to film 2 scenes for a whole season and then you know, don't return for 2 years for the next time they're on screen. So they have to move around because of that. But I agree with you that so episode 5, I think it is. I think it would, if that had been a 10-minute thing in that episode, maybe spread out through the whole episode, and then they focused more on other things. I think that would have been better, I think.
Yes. Now, some other things I wanted to say was that, and I think you probably already mentioned the character who essentially is Rand's mother. Um,
No, I
okay,
haven't mentioned. You mean the Aiel who fights in the snow?
yes.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like the fighting scene that we wanted to see. That was sort
Yeah.
of like maybe one of the best fighting scenes in the story. I did want to see more blood and gore, and that was bloody and gory,
Yeah.
and a birth. This.
Yeah. And that's bloody and gory as well, so to speak. No, I think they should have had one or two more fight scenes in the season. And the last episode was pretty short. I think it was intended to be maybe a 15 or 20 minutes, maybe not 20 minutes, but 15 minutes fight scenes between characters in a fight scene, not shooting at distance with a crossbow. That's the COVID thing playing its part. So, but I would have liked to seen, because Rand and Perrin and Matt, they are going to be great characters, down the line. In a few seasons, they will whoop everyone's ass. You wait and see. But now they're just village boys who have no experience. But I would have liked to see Lan have a few more fight scenes, and I would have liked to see Perrin, because Egwene get to stick the knife in his, the white cloaks. I would like to see Perrin be more active there than just growl a bit. I would like to see him whip some ass. So small nitpicks, but yeah. So a little more fighting would have been good. They needed 2 more episodes, I think.
Yeah, and something else I was going to mention. So, of course, we had the Children of the Light, or the Way of the Light, characters that played a role in this story, and it seems right away we are introduced to them, and we get a sense of their threat and what they can do. But they're really, in regards to that group of people, and if we're just looking at, I don't see the Children of the Light as being good nor bad. I mean, I guess for some people would say, okay, they're bad because they want to hurt people. But, if I didn't have to categorize them, I can easily distinguish the Children of the Light from all the other groups because they wear these white clothes.
Yeah.
But something that I've noticed is that the clothing, like overall, I did enjoy the costumes. I think everybody looks great, but sometimes it's not easy to distinguish, other than the scene where they were fighting, that scene that we just talked about where the woman was wearing, some people had yellow, and that was like a very distinctive cloak. And you knew, okay, if they're wearing yellow, they're the enemy, like you knew, and she was wearing, it just so happened that character was wearing white, and she had the face, I think she had a face scarf on. What's my point? My point is that sometimes it was not so easy to distinguish the characters, which particular groups of characters we were looking at. So, the Aes Sedai do wear specific colors.
Yeah.
And that was a good point. I wasn't quite sure whether if you grew up in the Tarvalon, you would wear a certain type of clothes. I think that the Children of the Leaf, or the people who live by the Leaf, had their clothes weren't that different from what the people in the Two Rivers were wearing, because when, and I'm not quite sure whether this is that relevant, but, costume wise, it was hard to kind of like distinguish, like when Perrin and when, what is her name? Egwene joined them, they fit right in. And I'm like, wow, their clothes look the exact same, or seem like it was from the same thing. And I'm thinking, well, their travels, it probably would have like a melange of different styles. But I wondered about whether or not, for example, when they got to and I can't remember the name of the city that's the walled city at the end, the soldiers had very distinctive outfits. And even the Lord, he had a very distinctive armor that he put on. Like that armor didn't look like anything else we saw in a lot of the series. And I think that was definitely a victory for that. So, I just was thinking, it's like would the Aes Sedai, other than the color that they're wearing, wear something that looks dramatically different from anyone else? For example, when the Aes Sedai were stopped by the White Cloths, he didn't know she was an Aes Sedai. And I thought, well, would he know? Like, would she be wearing something different? Or would, you had mentioned that she had a certain look on her face and she would be different from everyone else. You couldn't tell. So those were some things that I thought about. And I thought, well, maybe that's not translatable onto anything. But in regards to the White Cloths, I think that they did a good job of letting us see who these people are. Like, I couldn't really tell you what group they would be today, but I think it's very interesting that they have their beliefs and they have legions of people. It seems like they have an enormous amount of people who follow them and a lot of resources. And maybe they even have like a whole kingdom of stuff that, of people who support them and are really, have their back. And so, I think that I would like to see how their role is going to be as things, continue in the story.
When it comes to the Aes Sedai and people recognize them as Aes Sedai, that's why they have that giant ring in the TV series. In the books, they have a more smaller ring, but instead they have when they have used the power for a while, they get the age. They call it an ageless phase. It's hard to distinguish if they are 25 or 45 or 60. You don't know really. And
we really need that, Stubble. We need that today.
Yeah. Well, it's called a facelift now, I think. No, but in the books you often see Aes Sedai who maybe pull down the hood to hide their face. That's the equivalent of hiding her ring when they meet. They more or less. I suppose so. And so yeah, and I mean, it's a very difficult to do maybe 20 different cultures with different types of clothing that's distinguishable from each other. And when it comes to the traveling people, those who follow the way of the leaf, I think they have, simple clothing that's pink and gray, I think it was described. And I'm not sure now, but I think Egwene was given a cloak to keep her warm or something. That's why she looked like them later on. I may be wrong about that. I don't know. But I think in general they did a pretty good job of separating the different cultures from each other. And I thought the Aes Sedai, something I liked about them, it was that they had their individual colors, the green, the yellow, the blue, the red, and so on. But they had their national fashion in that color. So they were very different. And I can only imagine how much work and how much time they spent on coming up with all the different cultures and all the different, because one type of clothing, one type of fashion maybe work in one color, but it doesn't work in another color. And I'm no expert on that, but I guess it's a gargantuan task to do something like that. And and then at the end we saw the Sanshan, the those on the boats in the end. They have a completely different type of fashion as well, type of clothing. And so with the task at hand, I think they did an adequate job, or maybe a good job, but maybe they could have done something better, but I thought they did a good job anyway.
Yeah, it certainly was no small undertaking, and definitely something that must have taken years to pull that part off. So the costume department certainly earned their money with this job. And you had mentioned, we were talking about the setting of where it was filmed, and overall, now that you've seen the entire first season, what are your thoughts on the setting and how it was portrayed in season 1?
If you, with the setting, mean the sets and all of that, I think
the locations and stuff,
yeah, I think it was in general pretty good for a TV production. I thought it was they had spent a lot of money and a lot of time on coming up and doing the fine work on in Tarvalon in the White Tower. It was was a bit cramped. I thought maybe that was intentional, but I thought the White Tower would be a little more roomy, so to speak, a little bit. The hall felt a little bit small, the hall where they gathered. I thought that would be a bit bigger. And the corridors were not giant, they were pretty small. But on the other hand, they built, a few streets for Tarvalon, and they built a few streets for Shadalogov, and they built more or less the whole village for Two Rivers. At least the buildings around the square. I think they maybe added buildings behind that with CG later, but they spent a lot of time and money on this for a TV show anyway. And I thought they did a good job with what they had to do. And when it comes to things like the ways, the dark passage in episode 7, I think it was not exactly that the way I had imagined it when I read the books, but I thought for a visual medium, I thought they did a good job when it came to establishing that setting. And then I liked in episode 1 you had those ruined towers and buildings right at the beginning. It was nice how they connected that to the cold open in episode 8. I thought you saw the history and the the ruined future.
Yes, that was destroyed as a result of the Dark One's intervention on the One Power, I guess.
So it didn't feel like anything was, except maybe for episode 8 where they had to improvise and rewrite and do a lot of that stuff. In the other episodes, I think they did a good job when it came to the setting. And when it comes to the Blight in the episode 8, they had a forest picked out on, I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was in another country, and they couldn't travel, with all the restrictions and all those things. So they had to come up with another solution. They did the best they could. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but so with what they had to work with, I think they did a good job when it came to the setting. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that in regards to the settings, it did feel like it was the land of two rivers. It was like a paradise that their town was, and everything was fine, of course, until Beltane and the Trollocs showed up. But there was a sense of foreboding, and so you got that as everybody was kind of dancing, and it looked like a celebration. Their homes looked nice, the village looked nice. The parts where we see where they're heading to the White Tower, it was easily visible, like for miles and miles. That tower is visible, so that seemed very authentic. And then the other parts where they have to go to, the dark city, it was very dark, like it's supposed to show sort of a dark entity. And it looked very scary. I would never step a foot in there.
No, it felt like anything could be around any corner.
Yeah. It was very, it was a haunted city, and the fact that there was nothing alive in it also was very ominous. The other parts that I thought were interesting was, showing the way of the leaf, the travelers, or the tinkers, so to speak, traveling to and fro. And I found that fascinating, that they were fine with the fate that God has given them, or the fates be the way they are, and they just take it, and it's fine, and that's just how things are.
They follow the way of the leaf. What happens, and you accept it.
That's right. And I was like, gee, that's very relaxing. They kind of had, like some people who looked like they might be, existential style people, and I still love that part where Egwene says, they talk about the song that's going to bring them peace and happiness. And she kind of looks around and she says, "Are you sure you haven't found it already?" Like clearly they're calm and happy with, even the ones who went out to fight or whatever the situation is. It's all good for them. They just live their lives. Wow. What a relief to just have that kind of sense. And I got that with their caravans and traveling around, and if things happen, they roll with the punches. I also liked how we did see I'm forgetting what I'm trying to say here. Let me go to my notes.
While you go to your notes, do
Yes.
you think there is a song?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think we heard it, but perhaps it was undecipherable at the time. I also liked how the one thing I forgot to mention this, the setting of how Matt finds the dagger, or whoever was supposed to find that dagger. Let's say the dagger plays an important role in the story, or whether it does not. It seemed very clear, like there was nobody around, but there's this really expensive looking dagger. You know what I mean? Like it was kind of like, are you sure you should be touching that? And I think that if I were to really look at the Matt character and figure out why he took that, he was under the influence of the dark power that made him take it. I don't think Matt would, because I don't think Matt is a materialistic type of person. It's not important to him to have.
He stole to help his sisters. That's what he did. So.
Oh, okay.
In
it was
episode,
not for his own self. He would never do that for himself.
I mean, in episode 1, he did that.
Yeah.
With the bracelet he took from the girl to get things for the girls. Because he lost, they played dice before, and he wanted to win money to be able to afford things.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then he lost money, and then I got to do this for my sisters, and then he stole from someone who was richer than him, but he didn't steal it for himself. He still stole for someone else.
And so he's a selfless person.
Yes, maybe not completely selfless, but he has a selfless streak in him, I think. And but the dagger, I think, he's probably always heard of treasures and stuff, and he has a city, It doesn't belong to anyone else.
That's right. There's no one else around.
I can pick it up.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like an opportunistic thing. I don't think that he has really, honestly, I don't think he has a bad bone in his body, but that's just me. And I think it's very interesting that I have that perspective of him after everything he's been through. After Moraine saying she can't trust the character, they kind of created a scenario where I think that in that particular setting, it was meant for us to feel this way about Matt. Now, in regards to
just before we move on, I think the way Shada log off with how Matt gets the dagger compared to the books, I think it would have been very, very confusing if they followed the books in the TV show, because it's confusing just to read it in the books. It would be even more confusing to show it on screen, I think. So I think they did a good decision there to not follow the books in that regard, I think.
And I also think that when the party of 5 get to Tarvalon, and they're kind of like all there in the same place, but they don't know where each other is, I really like that they were kind of kept in the dark for a bit of it, where they didn't know, of course you're not going to know if someone arrived there, but Moraine knew all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, she kind of like had all the cards in her favor, or the odds.
But she never lied. She never lied. She had it on good authority that they were safe because she had met them. Yeah.
Yes. The other part that I think is interesting is when they finally do go into the ways. The setting where we see L'Oreal for the first time is nice. That library. Yeah. And is it Rand who's like, wow, kind of like, was it him who goes in there and is like, wow, look at this place. It was him, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought that was very interesting because he seemed very impressed with it. And, I'm not quite sure whether or not they present him as someone who is interested in books or knowledge or whatever, but I really liked that he saw that and could put value in it when he saw that library there. And then when they go into the ways, I thought that looked fantastic.
Yeah.
as you had already mentioned, it just looked like a bottomless pit. Like, where are they? This is some other dimension, some other place.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know how they would have done it better in what way they would have done it to make it better. I think sure, it wasn't perfect in every aspect, but I thought it was pretty good for what they were trying to do, at least. Yeah.
and were you impressed with what was supposed to be the eye of the world? What was supposed to be the eye of the world, or what?
The Eye of the World is completely different from the books. It has nothing resembling the things in the book. In the books, it's a pool of pure sardine. It's not tainted sardine. So, and then in the books we have a. It's pretty confusing in the books the first time you read it, and you don't really know everything that happens until you get to book 4, when you can go back and piece together the puzzle. Because we see one thing with Robin Jordan is that he's very, very tight third limited. So we see everything from Rand's point of view, and he doesn't know what's happening. So we don't know what's happening when you read it. We know kind of what's happening, but in the TV show, they thought they went to the Dark One's prison to kill him or whatever. I think they were set up, and I think it was one of the seals, and he manipulated them to crack the seal. And now I think there are some people that are free that wasn't free earlier that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear. And so, so overall, I think that they did a good job with the way this, the settings came out in it. And of course, we've spoken about the music before.
Yeah.
The music was just beautiful in this series. I think it also kind of matched what I would try and create. And I remember you sent me a video where the composer talked about how he created the music, and he was very specific. He said for people who watch or who've read the books, he tried to find out what they listened to. And I said, oh, okay, that's very interesting. And, perhaps it had some influence over how he created the soundtrack for this series.
Oh, I didn't get a survey from him. I didn't fill out a form of what I listened to. No, but I thought that the music was complementing the scenes. They never took over. I love the music of Indiana Jones, but there the music takes over and is in the foreground, and it blasts in your face, and you enjoy it, and it's great. Here it's more accompanying the visuals, and it's enhances the visuals, but the music never takes center stage, I think.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. There isn't any song that I'm sort of walking away singing other than The Man Who Can't Forget in the series. Now, one thing I did want to talk about is, and I kind of was like, well, how would you rank each episode? And I thought, well, that's kind of a lot of episodes to rank. But if I could, take the top 3 or the top 4 episodes for me, my top episode would be The Dark Along the Ways. And even despite the fact that for me personally watching it, it wasn't entirely clear that that Fane was following them. It wasn't clear to me. Like, I didn't know. And it wasn't until we saw him pop out of the ways that I said, oh, I guess he is there. I'm sure everybody else saw him in there. I'm sure everybody saw him.
He was in episode 2 as well. We
Yes,
never saw him directly, but we heard him whistle and we saw his shadow. So yeah, but
yeah.
they had the whistle as a cue that he was near. So when you heard the whistle, where is he? Oh, there he is. So yeah.
But I just love that episode. Of course, one of the major things for me is the fact that, well, first of all, we find out officially who the dragon is in that episode.
Yeah.
So that's very satisfying. And the other thing, of course, is that Nynaeve and Lan get together. So for me, that was very important. After all this stuff, like all that they've been through and the craziness out there, it's like, thank you. Somebody at least is gonna and it wasn't the only episode where people hooked up, but I really liked it for that reason. I felt that that was kind of important, and you kind of needed some sort of relief at that point because of the stress that everybody was
Yeah.
under. And also, the other thing that I was going to say is, I think it's at this particular episode, as you mentioned, that it starts off where we find out that Rand is, in addition to being the dragon, it starts off where we find out that he was, isn't it, where he finds out that he's who his mother is, so to speak, or the story. And I really liked that part too.
He never got the visuals. We got the visuals,
Yes.
but he knows that you know, he has the words from when he traveled with Tam, you know, through the woods. In the books, we get it directly. Here, we get it told afterwards through Rand's flashbacks. Yeah, so we get his lineage, and you've gotten the clues earlier with the Dial in the cage and the hair, and Loyal saying it in episode 5, I think. You know that, oh, you're an alien who don't think he's an alien, or whatever he says. So yeah, but I mean, and I have read the series a number of times. I mean, I knew that, and but episode 7 is my favorite as well. But I didn't like the forced love triangle that they had.
It was corny and it didn't make any sense. Like, it was kind of like, do we believe these guys? Come on.
I think there was an original scene with Matt that created a lot of tension, and they needed to create the tension, create tension between characters. I think there's some setup in some episodes earlier, so maybe there was this thought all along. I don't know, but I think it was a bad decision. We didn't need the tension there. It wasn't necessary. And
also, the actors, as far as I'm concerned, didn't pull it off. Like, I wasn't convinced that Perrin was in love with Egwene. Like, it's not true. He doesn't think about her that way. Like,
no, I think maybe he had a little candle burning somewhere long ago, but and maybe what if, you know, but nothing. I don't think it's something he thinks about or anything like that. But on the other hand, they've been traveling together for over a month, you know, on the road. I don't know.
Well, no, I think that I understand what you're saying in regards to how Perrin might feel about her, but I don't think he does. I think he cannot stop thinking about his wife. I think that she's been on his mind 24/7, and everywhere he looks and everything he touches reminds him of her. I think that's what's happening to him. At least that's how I interpret him.
Yeah, and he starts to doubt, you know, did I do it on purpose or whatever? But I thought the love triangle, it was bad.
Yeah, nobody believed it. Sorry, no. We didn't fall for it. He does not. Perrin is not in love with Egwene. So please, and
they're more like brother and sister, I think.
Well, you know, there were even some parts where Rand and Egwene were kind of, you know, standoffish to each other, that I was like, do these two really care about each other? Because if you cared about somebody, you probably wouldn't be treating them that way or acting that way around them. And, you know, I think that they could have, you know, focused a little bit more on how would someone really respond in this scenario, you know, where he says that he waited an hour for her to come and find him. And I'm like, no, this is a crazy time. You already know that you are the dragon. You wouldn't wait. You would have gone and told her, look, I'm sorry, but I love you. And I shouldn't have said those things to you. He would have made up with her right away, give her that sense of security so she could go to sleep, and then he can take off with Moiraine. He wouldn't have waited. So this is just how I would look at that. But of course, the part where Nynaeve and Lan are together, as far as I'm concerned, is sort of like the climax of this whole thing for me, because it was just such a cool thing. And I still am a little find it, you know, she did come off stalkerish, it's true, but I think Lan was kind of like, she's following me, isn't she? You know, like in his mind, he's been thinking about her a lot, and I think that they could have intimated that through Moiraine, you know, like when she goes off to see Suan, because by the time she saw Suan, Nynaeve had already saved Lan. So,
Yeah.
she could have kind of said something like, well, I'm releasing you from your bond tonight. And he could have said, she might say, I know that your heart is with another, or something, like, anyway, it's like we both need the break or whatever,
Yeah.
and I understand how hard it is for you to be in this position with me. I think that would have been something very interesting, because at least at that point it would have been like, well, are they going to get together? Like, is this, like, what's going on? Like, we would have known how he at least felt. I mean, I'm sure he was very flattered that this woman saved his life, but at the same time, he probably was thinking, I don't know what he was thinking. Has anybody, like, what happens if you save somebody's life like that? I've never saved anyone's life like that. I mean,
Yeah.
she
But but
saved his
but
life.
but they had a thing before she saved his life. They had, the flirtation before a little bit. So there was something there, I think.
So there were sparks flying between the two of them already.
Yeah, when they had that conversation in episode 4 before the attack and everything, I think there was something there.
And when I remember he kind of like was saying, you can come and stay near our fire or something like that. And I was like, ooh, I like that talk. Does that mean if she goes to the fire, then something else happens? Like, who knows? Like, what you are committing yourself to, or what you were saying you're okay with.
And in the books, all of this happens more or less off screen, because we follow Rand, and even when he sees Lan and Nynaeve, he sees their reactions, but he doesn't put 2 and 2 together. He's kind of dumb that way. In the first book, he doesn't see what's and so we as the reader don't piece it together either, and it's blindsides us at the end, that they more or less profess their love for one another, or whatever in the end, which is a very nice scene, but it comes out of nowhere in the books. In the TV series, because we see things from their point of view as well here, we get to see the build up, and you can say that Robert Jordan was a great writer, but he wasn't good at writing romance, I think. So they did a better job with that in the TV show.
Well, then this is something they got spot on. The next episode I was going to say that was my favorite would be episode 4. Obviously, this is the episode where we see Nynaeve kind of show her abilities, I think. Yeah, I think it's that one. And it's just so incredible. But also, I think what's very interesting is that it's the episode that the Aes Sedai decided to kind of take things in their own hands. So, it's like there's a lot going on in regards to the one power in this episode. And the other thing is, we also find out from the Gleeman that there was another person who he knew about who didn't have a great outcome when they found out. This is how kind of like Rand and Matt find out what could happen, or at least Rand finds out what could happen. And I really like that. So just seeing her save so many people. I mean, she obviously saved his life, but everybody else had injuries, and she just really absolutely blows it away.
Yeah, I love the scene with Nynaeve. The only thing that worries me a little bit is that, or there are 2 things. One thing is that they are Jordan was very, these are the rules, of the magic, and here's the metaphysics, here's how it works, and in the first book, he hadn't defined it complete yet, so there's a little bit loosey-goosey there when it comes to that. But in the TV show, they are not really consistent on that point, I think. So I hope they get more consistent with that. And then the thing, I love the scene with Nynaeve, but maybe we should have waited with that to season 2 when she, so we see an increase over time, maybe, and not that huge explosion at once. Because where do you go next? So, but I love the scene. But there are some potential problems with it further on.
Yeah, and I know throughout the series I've been asking you, from time to time, about, well, we saw the use of the one power, and what power is it, and it's kind of hard to define sometimes, because okay, there's like 5 elements or something to that. I don't know all the details, but let's say there's 5.
There are four earth, wind, fire, water, and then spirit. So there are 5.
Right.
And they combine that to get an effect. But maybe we'll see more of that in season 2, because I think we'll get more information about the magic system in season 2.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really, it's not that we weren't given information, it's just that we don't have a lot of the rules. So, I think that it's something that, and also, while we were kind of like, it's true that in some points, some of the characters said, well, you trained Nynaeve to use the one power, but we didn't really see it, like there was a lot that we didn't see. And I wonder, perhaps it might've been good to have seen some part where someone's kind of like getting trained. And I don't even know how that would work on screen, but just to kind of like understand, or even say, well, this person is in training to do this. And we did hear about one woman who was in training for 5 years and she didn't even become an Aes Sedai. And I'm like, wow, that's awful. Like you spent all that time training to become an Aes Sedai and it didn't even work. So I think that it would be interesting just to see, what would Moraine train Egwene in if she had to. She's like, well, let me show you 2 simple things to do, and she would be able to do it, and then we would know. It's like, oh, go ahead and use it. It's kind of like in and I know I shouldn't use this as an example, but in Harry Potter, where they'll tell you very specific spells and you hear about these spells, and and it was a big deal.
And in Harry Potter, it's like, oh, this spell for this movie, then we'll never hear about it again. And then this spell for this movie, or maybe
For in this particular case, the only spell that I know for certain that we heard, or at least we know about, is the gentling, and they have to lock together. And that was something else that I thought was very interesting, was that we've seen them do this linking quite a lot, which is great. Like the linking is fantastic. And we've seen them do the linking, and we saw at least twice. The first time we saw the linking, it was a very ordered process. And even though they were, I think they were all together, but they were not linked. Then that disaster happened. Nynaeve saved them, and then they linked together. So a lot was going on. Like, let's say that day, like this was a long day for these Aes Sedais. Like they're tired. This is, this in their mind, all the events that happened was not anything anybody could have predicted. But I have a feeling that Loghain had at some point thought that there would be a point where things would go too far with this particular false dragon. I have a feeling that she might have sensed that in him, and she knew that if that happened, that would give her the opportunity to gentle him. And so the gentling was the one spell that we know, or at least I can say, oh, he's been gentled. I know what that means.
Yeah.
And you said that for women, it's got a different name. It's called, what is it called?
Stealing.
No,
not stealing. Stilling.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've stilled the ability of someone to use the one power. Now, the other thing that I was going to say is we see linking again, but it's much more terrifying, isn't it, Stubble? In the last episode, when we see that, I mean, it looks horrifying. This isn't anything that I want to even have anything to do with, honestly, because it looks so scary. And I don't question the lady's reason for using the one power. She did this to try and save the city, and that's wonderful that she did that. She sacrificed herself. The other 2 ladies sacrificed themselves, but boy, that was terrifying. And then she kind of, like, when she said she couldn't control it, is that something that has happened in the books where someone gets control of the one power, or tries to use the one power and they can't control it, other than, let's say, the men who perhaps maybe have that experience? I mean, what is your interpretation of her getting everybody, linking them together? She knew to do that because she'd been in the White Tower and had seen linking. But what's your impression of that experience overall, where she kind of loses control and ends up destroying herself? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm very mixed on that, so I'll be talking now for 10 or 15 minutes. No, but first thing is that I think they link too easy. Because it's because I read from the books. It's not that easy to link. It's quite a procedure to do the whole thing. It's not complicated, but it's difficult. And so I didn't like that they just link finished. And in the books, there's a thing that prevents someone from drawing more than you can handle in a link. So the other women, if they followed the lore from the books, they're free to do their own thing in the series. I'm not against that, but in books, the others wouldn't have died from the link. There's like a buffer built in, more or less, that otherwise it's horrible to give someone else that power over you. But something I liked was that we got to see that the power is very seductive. You want to draw more and more and more. And she didn't have the training and the discipline, and that's probably why she didn't become an Aes Sedai. She flunked her course in the Aes Sedai ship. So it was maybe irresponsible of her of linking with other women, because she didn't have discipline. She couldn't control herself. And because when you read the books and you see from a point of view of someone channeling the power consciously, you get the whole thing. Because I don't think we get anyone channeling besides Rand consciously point of view in the books. Moraine channels a lot, but we never get her point of view. So when they hold the power, they feel like, I smell the smells more clearly. I see more clearly. It's like a drug. It's like, I want more. And they're reluctant to let go, because when they let go, they go back to their mundane state, that we all live in. So they showed this euphoria that Amalisa has when she draws more and more and more. And in the books, there are examples of people who more or less dies from drawing more than they can handle. But mostly when you say burnout, you mean that you more or less still yourself, because you overload the connection, so to speak. You draw more than you can handle, and that cuts off the flows, the connection to the power. But here they died, and there have been examples of people who are drawn more than they physically can handle, and more or less obliterate themselves. So I have mixed feelings about that. I didn't really like it, and it's overpowered the women, because all of a sudden 5 women can beat 10,000 Trollocs, and that has implications for the future. So, and untrained women. So, because it was just Amalisa who had formal training, I think. Maybe the other has gone to the tower, also flunked, I don't know. Nynaeve has a lot of power, but she has no training whatsoever, and Egwene has a lot of power. But I think that was a problem with this thing, that, okay, Trollocs are not dangerous anymore. Because if you compare them wiping out thousands of Trollocs with Moraine in the first fight, that was more believable. She took out maybe 50 Trollocs or something at the end. I don't know, a lot of them. But there were not thousands she took out.
And she got injured.
So I think the last, the linking there at the end created more problems then is solved, I think. But so that's one of the big gripes I have with the last episode. That and the lack of fighting, but that has with COVID, all of that. But yeah.
Well, my third episode would be the Flame of Tarvalon, obviously because we meet Sue-Ann and her story, and we see the Armelin seat. And one other thing that I liked about this particular episode as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the episode where and I hope I'm right, where she finds out that Matt has that dagger. Am I correct? I don't know if it's this one. And so
yes, it is. It's the episode that's completely told more or less, I think, from Moraine's point of view all the way through.
Yes, and of course there's that beautiful love scene between Moraine and Sue-Ann, and I thought that was just lovely. And then we also see Moraine do something that I thought was very special. She removes this evil entity from Matt, more or less. And then you had mentioned it before, she kind of closes her mouth like this, and you can see like the entity like trying to enter her, literally like go in her mouth. Like it's a very strange, and she's kind of like this. And she pulls it from Matt and pushes it into the dagger. And you had mentioned before that once she completes this process, even Lan will not touch the dagger. Like he takes a cloth and picks up the dagger. And I thought that scene alone was kind of like a lot of things that people want to see happen, where you see someone and then there's that entity that's bad. I mean, we kind of saw it with Logain, but it wasn't the same. Like with Matt, it felt a little different. It didn't feel like with Logain, who has, I hope I'm saying his name right, where he's accepted or saying that he's the dragon and he can channel. It's a little different. Like his approach, I felt was, a somewhat more confident approach. But Matt was kind of like contradicting himself. He was laying there and he was like, leave me alone, and you'd be like, what's wrong with him? Matt wasn't Matt.
Right.
Logain was Logain totally. Like this is Logain. Logain's like, I'm badass and I can do all sorts of great magic. But Matt was not Matt. And I liked that she could pull that out of him. I don't know what spell that was, but she could pull that out of him. And then all of a sudden Matt had some relief, but he still wasn't himself. Like it changed him somehow. It affected him. Having that entity in him for so long with the dagger really hurt him somehow. And I love that they did that.
Yeah. And we don't really see Matt except when, they're going in after that. Until they're going into the Waygate at the end of the episode. So we don't really see his personality show through. So we don't know if it's removed everything completely or if there's something left there. So we'll have to see. In the books, there's a long process until Matt finally gets rid of everything. He's not completely healed up from the dagger until book 3. So, but he's not directly affected by the dagger. In the first book, they have that scene where Moraine heals or separates him from the daggers, which is more or less equivalent of what's happening here. But there's still Matt still have a craving for it, but he tries not to touch it, and all that thing.
Well, is it fair to speculate that if Matt had not found that dagger, that his path would have been very different, that he wouldn't have been manipulated by the dark one or the dark whatever so easily? Is it fair to say that?
Well, he wouldn't. When they see the tower in the background, when they're going on that field, and there's a kid running past him, and he more or less shouts at the kid. I don't think we would have gotten that scene. He would have been a more normal person walking along the, So it's completely affected his demeanor, so to speak.
And also one other scene that I wanted to add to that, Stubble, and of course it's in the episode that has to do with Steppen mostly, but as they're parading Logain into the streets, Matt sees something that no one else seems to be able to see from Logain. He's
Yes.
sort of up on the balcony and he sees like a totally different Logain. Logain's like, yeah, OG's back. He was like a gangster riding into town and
Yeah.
he's in a cage. Like that's not what Logain looks like right now. But he saw that. He was like, yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? Oh my God. So I
Yeah,
think that
I
was
don't
good
know.
too.
I don't know. This may be a little spoilery, perhaps, but I can say more now that we know that Rand. The books he sees Rand and laughs. Here he sees Matt and Rand and laughs in the TV show.
Oh.
And in later books, we learn that he laughed because he can see Tavern. Both Rand and Matt are Tavern, so they are. So he saw someone that he knew would change the world, and he knew that. Oh, that's that's the guy, not me, and he started to laugh.
Oh, wow.
And so
Wow.
here he sees both Rand and Matt at the same time, and by editing we assume that he's laughing at Matt, but I think he sees Rand, and that's why he laughs. But so it's not out of madness that he laughs, but it's out of should I laugh or should I cry? Because
The realization of it all.
right.
Wow, that is quite a bit of information.
Yeah, but I couldn't really say it earlier when we didn't have the
No, you
reveal who was the
couldn't.
dragon, and all of that. So, but it was
Oh my,
a little spoiler, but not a big spoiler.
wow, that is really something else. And I don't think I would have guessed that was what was going on. I wondered why, and the other thing too was that Matt had kind of, like, we've kind of seen another element about Matt being, in this position that he's in, is that in the series he does seem quite shaken.
Yeah.
And he seems like a very sensitive kind of guy. He doesn't seem like a bad guy. So, like and I know that you had said the fact that they changed some of the history of his family around, which is totally ridiculous to do. But I think they did that just to show that he's a caring person, to make it seem like there was something else or some reason why he had to care for them, and
Yeah.
why he wouldn't tolerate people behaving badly, so to speak. It had to be something right on his front door. But I think that when we're looking at him as a character, he's the one that seems to be the most corrupted. And I don't know whether it's just something that's in him, but he's definitely getting corrupted, and it's hard to watch him have to struggle. He's struggling. Like, we mentioned it already, that scene where he's at that farm.
Yeah.
And, that scene where he's holding the dagger and he's just like, it's almost like he's in his trance, and on the other side, they cleverly put a sheet or something, so the wash was hung up inside this barn or wherever they are. And, unbeknownst to you, like the shadow sort of is behind, or whatever entity this is, the dark entity is behind there. And the Gleeman seemed to know right away what to do. So, the reason why the Gleeman had to explain about his nephew was because he would have to explain how he knew what to do, let's say in Matt's situation. But I don't think anybody could have seen how cool that scene when Moraine removes that entity or tries to remove it from him. It looks really cool. It looks really cool. Like, that was maybe the best scene for me, honestly, in regards to what fighting the Dark One. Let's say if the Dark One wasn't right in front of her, if she was fighting anybody influenced having been influenced by the Dark One, or an entity that was a dark entity, I really thought that this was what I would expect to see from an Aes Sedai. What about you?
Yeah, and you visually got exactly what was happening. You didn't have to explain anything. It's very clear for the audience, and I think it was a great scene. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah. So those were some of my favorite, I guess, episodes and scenes and things. And it's not so much that I didn't care for the other episodes, but, you know, you and I had discussed about how, you know, that water episode would step in kind of, you know, other than that scene that we just spoke about, you know, it was hard to see Steppen kind of fall, you know, if you will.
Yeah. He was
And
such a nice guy as well, you know, and he just lost himself.
He was really nice, good looking guy there, you know, his whole life ahead of him, or at least a good, I don't know how much time ahead of him. The other thing I was going to say is, so the rest of the episodes for me were okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention anything else about like some of the favorite things in some of the episodes? I know I mentioned I kind of counted down a few episodes that I liked.
Yeah.
And you said that
your top 3 was my top 3, but not in the same order.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So for me, it was 7, 6, and 4.
Oh.
And yeah, and 7 because we got more of the characters, more the principal characters, more the kids, so to speak, and got more, albeit the you know, love triangle and all of that, but we got more of their personalities, and I think the ways when the wind said all their fears got us a lot of their characters, and I liked that use of the Machine Chin, the Black Wind. I think that was a clever thing to do. And in episode 6, I liked the politics. I liked the foreshadowing that was dropped all the time that you maybe didn't pick up on in the same way that I did. And I liked, you know, the scene with Moraine and Swan where they do their thing. And you know, that's not in the books. They don't have an active romance, but they had a romance. No, they had a romance when they were novices and accepted. They were, as they refer to as pillow friends in the White Tower. They, you know, it can be lonely there, but some of the pillow friends continue their romance after they are Aes Sedai. But as far as I know, they didn't do that in the books. But in the TV show, they continued their romance after they were Aes Sedai. So yeah, that was nice. In episode 4, you know, it was the ending with the battle, and I liked the Matt and Rand stuff in that as well. And my least favorite episode is episode 8 by a mile. And yeah, and episode 5, a lot of that was it was not a nice episode. It was a little bit depressing episode, but it was after the big climax in episode 4, we needed a little, get back, but it was a little depressing at times, and they spent far too much time on that storyline where they could have done something else more constructive, I think. And episode 1, I think, was too rushed, too bullet point. We have to go through these things, and we didn't really get. But all the others are in the middle, 2, 3, and yeah, those were all the others. So that's how I ranked them. And I don't know if we should do this now, but as a total for the season, how did you rank the whole season? If you had a out of 10, what would you rank it?
I'll give it an 8 out of 10.
Right. I would probably give it 6.5 or 7, depending on my mood of the day. I think episode 8 dropped it 1 whole point for me. It would have been maybe an 8, except for episode 8. That dropped it a lot for me. And I didn't like the end with the big wave. It was no logic to that. Why did they do that? So it was just perfect. But anyway.
Honestly, I think they didn't need the wave. Just them showing up on the boats would have been fine. We didn't need to see the tidal wave part. Like that was maybe a little corny.
Do you know what would have been more effective? That we had seen another ship that was sinking, and someone using the power against the ship would have
Yeah,
been much more effective and made more narrative sense as well.
like
But
using the people who could wield the power like cannon, you know, like
yeah,
they're the cannons on the ship. And um
I have a
um
question for you about
yes.
this episode, about the
Oh,
length
our
of this
episode,
episode.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
because you mentioned to me earlier that you wanted to keep it under 2 hours for different
Yes, we have
reasons.
it's an hour and 35 minutes so far.
Yeah, so maybe we should do a part 2 to this thing, or what? How do you
Yeah, we
think
could
we
do
should do?
that. This could be part 1.
Yeah,
And
but should we end it with something? Maybe, I don't think we mentioned special effects really.
we haven't. I mean, there's a lot we haven't mentioned. And what we could do is we could end it here
Yeah,
and continue another episode.
yeah.
Um,
Instead of rushing the finish line
no
under two
reason to
hours.
rush.
Yeah,
No reason to rush. We can take our good old time, Stubble.
yeah.
Uh,
So
and so,
this will get a new title. It will be called
yeah.
Part 1.
Well, yes, this is part 1 of our
Yeah,
Wheel of Time season 1 wrap up.
yeah,
Thank you for joining Stubble and I for part 1. There will
yeah,
be a part 2
yeah.
following this. And thank you for watching our review, a part 1 review of the season 1 wrap up of the Wheel of Time.
And it was an abrupt ending. Sorry about that, but
No, well, you know, there's much more to come, everybody. There is going to be a part 2
yeah,
of this wrap up. There's also going to be more episodes where Sobel and I talk about the Wheel of Time, especially the books.
yeah,
And of course, you know, we will be covering season 2 when that comes out. So,
yeah.
you know, there's a
And
lot more to come.
and for season 2, this is my suspicion. I have nothing to back this up on except my own suspicion. You know, season 1 was mostly book 1 with some other stuff thrown in. I think season 2 will be book 2 and book 3 with some stuff
Oh,
thrown in.
well, a lot of your predictions have come true, Stubble,
Yeah,
especially the
because
ending of the series.
because they can't have 14 season, I think. So
Right, exactly.
they have to combine books. So, but that's
Okay.
just my suspicion. I have not heard anything official from anyone or anything like that. And I have no idea how they're going to do it, because
Well,
yeah,
it's definitely something we should talk about, because there's a lot that we would expect from season 2 that I think we're going to talk about in the next video, what we're hoping for,
yeah,
you know, any predictions, a lot of things that we have not discussed yet, and
yeah,
we will be discussing in the next video. So for everybody who's watching, thank you for checking out
yeah.
this part 1 of the Wheel of Time spoiler season review, wrap up, recap, part 1. And please join us for part 2. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everybody is well, and always remember to be kind.